Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Barbara Waxman, and Barbara is a gerontologist, a coach and a speaker, and she's very interested in all things midlife, and we're going to discover exactly what she's been doing recently. Barbara, welcome. You have written a book, haven't you? And it's called Middlessence, is that right?
Middlessence Manifesto.
What's this all about?
In 2015, I moved to Italy for a year to undo and pick up roots, plant myself in new soil, and repot. And while I was there, I reflected on the 15 or so years of coaching as a gerontologist and realized there were patterns that kept coming up with clients who really are from all over the world in different situations, different work phases of their careers, different life phases, but all around, call it 45 to 65 or 70. And what I realized is that we now live long enough to go through adolescence twice. And so I named it Middlessence, a second adolescence, but with wisdom. And I started to write this book and ended up just writing this short manifesto so that it's really accessible to people.
I think that's really interesting, actually, the whole adolescence thing, because I have this theory, and I know other people that I've talked to about, basically, when we go through menopause, particularly, with the change in our hormones, we're then almost like going back to our prepubescent selves, aren't we? So that it's exactly that, going through, as you say, going through adolescence again, because it's puberty in reverse.
It is. There are actually like 4 qualifiers. One is our hormones change, and actually there's androgyny. There's a hormonal change for men as well, but nobody ever talks about that. So our hormones change, our bodies shift, probably in ways we're not so crazy about, but there's that thing going on at the same time. Our relationships are changing in all kinds of ways. More people are caregivers. More people are caregivers for multiple generations. Kids may be leaving the nest, so we're becoming empty nesters. Lots of divorces, and we can get into that maybe later. Relationships shifts, new relationships, waning relationships. So there's this sense we have, like adolescence, where do I fit in? And I'm not young, but I'm not old. So it's this second adolescence.
I know. In the UK, we have a very big online community called Mumsnet. I don't know if you've heard of it. So it's for mums. And when you go through Mumsnet, the next stage is Gransnet. And I was thinking, I am a mum. I'll always be a mum, but I don't define myself as being a mum. And I'm certainly not ready for Gransnet. I'm a long way off getting ready for Gransnet. So, it's that bit in the middle that there isn't that much that caters to us, is there?
That's right. There's so much. So if you think that we've added roughly 3 decades to our life expectancy in the last century. So the default thinking is that we're older longer, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to be older longer. We've added those years to the end. But that is not the way that we experience them. The way we experience them is that we've added, call it 2 decades, solidly in the middle of life. So I'm 56, about to be 57. And that used to be kind of old. I've had a full hip replacement. I could have made the decision and had a mindset like, oh, well, I'm in my 50s. I have to have body parts replaced. Like, I guess I'm old. But rather, I feel like I'm just getting going. My kids are in their 20s. They're mostly launched. We have the technology, so I'm rocking titanium down my leg, and I can still do a split.
Wow.
Yeah. So there is this, if we know how to cultivate our energy, which is a part of what I do with people, this stage of middlessence can be the most intensely exciting, challenging, meaningful stage yet.
I'm definitely with you on that, Paige. Mm-hmm. I think it's such an exciting time of life if we can embrace it, as you say, if we can learn from it, but not have this negative view that, you know, it's all downhill from here and, you know, it's all just, we might as well, I don't know, sit in the corner or whatever, but that we have so much more to life, don't we, as you say?
Not only so much more, but I really do believe we're just getting going, because we've gone through enough life experience, but so many of us are moving at rapid fire speed. Our days are waking up, feeling a little bit behind when we haven't even gotten out of bed. We're responding to emails. We're responding to things we should have gotten to before. And so if we can get ahead of that, then really what we're able to do is look at this time and say, I can take everything I've learned in my life, and now I'm freer than ever to start putting it to work, because one of the beautiful things about middlessence is we care less and less about what other people think.
Why do you think that is?
I think that, you know, there's this expression, in your 30s, you're wondering, what is everyone thinking about me? In your 40s, you're still concerned about your image and what you think about yourself. In your 50s, you start to realize we're all just thinking about ourselves. So I might as well make my life the most important to me and figure out what I really care about and who I want to be, rather than fitting into a role that I thought I should have fit into as a mother or what have you, or living someone else's dream. I hear this a lot from people. I thought I was supposed to be like this in life. But now, as I'm approaching 50, I'm feeling like, wait a minute, I know what I want, and I got to kind of switch gears here. I hear this all the time. We gain clarity. Women gain power and clarity as middlessence.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet I think there's danger that we don't acknowledge that or see that or really reflect on the power of that, and we can let it pass us by, can't we, if we don't tap into it, which I think is why what you're doing is so important, and this whole discussion that, you know, I'm having on this podcast, because it's so easy, I think, to just accept the status quo and not to think, you know, that actually there's much more, and I can just be getting started now.
What I love about what you're doing, that you are creating community amongst a wide group of women to say, you're not alone. We're in this together. You know, one of the things that I'm really focused on doing is being fierce advocates, enabling women to be fierce advocates for one another. And I don't think we've been trained that way, frankly. And I think part of what you're doing is starting to create this community so we can say, let's advocate for one another. When someone makes a request for help, let's say yes, and let's help one another make it happen. Because the truth is, women are powerful creatures, and we also have the empathy, the listening skills, the compassion to literally make the world a better place. So can you imagine what it would be like if your entire community started to advocate for one another, in addition to learning from one another? Real change can happen. And that's why I think you and I are kind of so in sync about working with middlessence.
Well, that is absolutely my dream. When I started out on this route, I had this dream of this global network of powerful midlife women supporting each other, building each other up, and changing the world, because I think the world desperately needs some more feminine energy in it. Absolutely. You know, and I think the older we get, the better positioned we are to lead, to step into that leadership role, and to, as you say, advocate for each other. But there's a danger, isn't there? I mean, I've said this I was interviewing some people from the lovely ladies from the Twisting the Plot podcast just this week. And we were talking about how the patriarchy has set it up that women compete rather than necessarily, work well alongside each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been taught to compete. And I think we have to somehow change that, don't we? We have to either get a mindset shift so that we move from competing with each other as we get older to absolutely working with each other and building on that strength and that power.
You're 100% right. I think the first step is to shine a light on it, just like you're doing, and saying, we have been inculcated in this idea that we're in competition. And on the one hand, we think about ourselves in competition. It's an underlying thought, not a top of mind thought.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, women are awesome. Women are connectors. And we always also have these tremendous social bonds. So I don't think it's that hard to break through. For example, I'm part of a group. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm part of a group called How Women Lead. And we've developed a group of over 5,000 women leaders. And one of the tenets is to support one another. And it is amazing when someone puts out a call, a message about, I'm doing this, I could use support. Other influential women leaders just say yes. And a recent example that I had was, unfortunately, the United States has been making some very unfortunate decisions around the border with Mexico and what happens with families. So I know this is not a political podcast, but let me just say,
it's all right. You can say whatever you like.
As a woman, as a mother, I have been bereft. And so I just put out there, as I was thinking it through, who might want to go to the border with me to see what we can do to help, in particular, their children being held without their parents. And can I tell you, it was like a steamroller of response, of people ready to spend their time, their money, and make it happen and make change at the border. So I think we need to shine a light. When we shine a light, reminding one another that we're not in competition, and then interact in ways that will make the world better, it's powerful.
It's very powerful. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really excited by it because I think we are having these conversations, we are having these discussions, and I think women are beginning to get an inkling of how powerful we can be. And yeah, that really does excite me.
Yeah. It's like Michelle Obama, when she gave a speech once and she said, when they go low, we go high. And that's what I feel like it is with women. We can take the high road, and now it's time we do it together.
Wow, it's very exciting. Yeah. I just want to have this army of midlife women, like sorting all the stuff out, sorting all the silly male decisions out, and I don't know, just coming together, because as you say, we build communities, don't we? That's what we're about. I think is we. While we're not so driven to nurture post-menopause, we still have it ingrained in us that is what we do. We create rather than destroy.
Yes. So I want to make a note about men. I love men. And I think as we go towards and through menopause as women, and as we actually gain power, because we feel like we don't care as much about what people think and everything else, men are actually losing power. In the United States, the highest suicide rate is amongst middlescent white men. Why? Because their power is waning, both because we're changing as a country in terms of diversity, thank goodness, and also women are on the rise. So when you look at divorce rates, and again, this is for the States, but I have a feeling it's not too different in other places as well. Women initiate, I'm just looking at my statistic, about 60% of divorces after 40, because they're saying, perhaps I'm more financially capable, I'm freer to make my own decisions, And if nothing else, I'm just done with this. So I think women's power increases and men's start to wane. And what happens, and the opportunity in that, is that we are a power for good, and men are more, are softer. And they want so much to be better people. I think they come into questioning themselves and trying to understand how they can be better. So I think that as we have a tremendous ability to influence everybody, men and women included. So it's not changing to us against them. I think women just need to own our power and invite men to come along. And I think they want to come along.
I think if they can embrace it, they can embrace that change rather than feeling threatened by it,
right?
Then it can be as exciting for men as for the women in their lives.
That's right. Well, a lot of relationships will end because they are threatened by it. But in some ways, that when people have a mindset that this is how our relationship is and it can't be any other way, that's why I think there's so many divorces in this age group. However, I think as men go on, they actually realize and buy into that together. We're relational beings and they don't want to be alone. Women have more social networks than men. I mean, that's proven fact. So yes, I think there's just tremendous potential there for women to lead.
So if you had one piece of advice for a woman in midlife and beyond who's sort of struggling to adapt to this change in herself during this period, what would it be?
Struggling to adapt to which kind of change? Tell me a little bit more.
The whole midlife change and being a different person and perhaps struggling to find her role and what it might be.
I would say look around you. Wake up to the beauty that exists amongst other people who have done this. There haven't been that many role models before, but now there are. So my advice would be wake up to the potential and see it in others. And then my second piece of advice would be apply that to your story and ignite your own dreams again.
Yeah, it's a great time to revisit dreams that we've let slide, isn't it, in the past?
Absolutely.
So tell us a bit more about the idea of repotting.
So there comes a time in our lives where we just get stuck. Some of our thinking gets stuck. We're stuck in our patterns at work. And we need to metaphorically pull up our roots and find a pot that's our next size, right size for us. And in order to do that, we have to plant ourselves in new soil. And we have to water ourselves with the nutrients that we need in order to continue to grow and thrive. So that might be a physical moving. I picked up and moved to Italy for a year in 2015. I mentioned that before, and made a conscious decision not to befriend Americans, expats, because that wouldn't really be repotting. That would be just kind of a long vacation. And to learn about Italy and stretch myself by learning a new language. And of course, I'd like to infuse myself with the nutrients of the wine and the awesome food there. So getting away, sometimes it's a physical change, and it need not be a year, but it can be something that is more than a vacation. So maybe 3 weeks. It's picking yourself and putting yourself somewhere a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So for me, it was not speaking English when my Italian really wasn't very good. It can also be for people who are saying, I can't get away, repotting your thoughts, picking yourself up and putting yourself with people who think differently. Another personal example. Here in the States, before our last election, I really listened to news channels and read newspapers and hung with my friends who really have the same way of thinking. So I was completely blindsided. In fact, I was with a client the afternoon of the election, and she was in tears. And she's a woman leader, very knowledgeable. I wasn't even listening to her. She said, "I'm so concerned." I said, "What are you talking about?" Because actually, another client of mine was very involved with Hillary Clinton's campaign and said, "It's done. There's no way Trump can win." So we were all in a mindset that was stuck and rooted. So now I don't do it enough, but I try to repot my thinking by exposing myself to information that I don't agree with so that I can actually have a wider frame of mind. So repotting is the healthiest thing you can do. If you can get away, that's great. But if you can't get away, it's also about your thinking. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that idea. I really love that idea, especially about the thinking, because I think it's very easy, isn't it, as we get older, to get entrenched in the way we think. Yes. And to assume that, the way we think is right. And similar to you, I lived in a nice little liberal bubble in London, and Brexit, hit me from left field. I was like, whoa, yes. What's that all about? Certainly wasn't expecting it, was absolutely devastated by it, by the referendum result. Mm-hmm. And 3 years later, we're still paying the price of all this malarkey. But I realized that, yes, I lived in a bubble. I read things that corresponded with the way that I thought, and therefore I was not aware. So yes, similarly I try now to do something similar, and to actually engage with views that I don't like, and to read news sources that do not reflect my worldview, because it's so important. It's really important. But it's a shame that we both had to have a shock like that.
Yes, it is.
To make us aware.
Yeah. So, and I guess what we're both saying is the healthiest thing we can do as Middlessence is to stay a little bit uncomfortable. So yes. The advice that you asked me about before, I guess I would say, everybody who's listening, step just out of your comfort zone on a weekly basis. You can choose how, but that is a little bit of the magic to keep our energy, our insightfulness, our mindset growing and not getting stuck. But it's a little bit uncomfortable, whether it's physically exercising, or when it's your diet, nutritionally, just being outside of your comfort zone from coming home in the same glass of wine routine, what's going to shake things up for you, and on many different levels. I actually have something called the Thriving Quiz, which is a 25-question quiz, really easy to take, where people get a score. Are they thriving? Are they sputtering? Are they in the blah zone? And it helps people kind of assess where they're stuck. Anyway, happy to give it to people for free. They can go to my website.
Excellent. That sounds good. So, and you talk about a certain number of essential elements to thriving, don't you?
Yes.
In midlife.
Yes.
I do the same thing. So what are your essential elements?
So there are 5. Let's see. I bet we're going to overlap. The first has to do with the most foundational, health and nutrition, because let's face it, we are what we eat. We are. And everyone is different. Some people do better with more protein, some others with another kind of stabilization part of their diet. So people actually have to do some research for themselves about themselves. So health and nutrition. Then the second essential element is rest and restoration, which is very unpopular because we're all so busy. We don't have enough time to rest, right? And we meet each other. It's like, how busy are you? I'm so busy. Like, we wear it as a badge of honor.
I know, the busy badge.
Yes. So that second essential element is knowing the rest that you need, because fewer than 2% of the population can manage on 6 or fewer hours. And whenever I lead a workshop and I say, show of hands, how many of you need 6.5 hours? Probably 20% of the people, 1 out of 5 raise their hands. And I say, it's impossible. So health and nutrition, rest and restoration, focus and growth. That's that mindset part of repotting. Then we have joy and passion is the 4th essential element. And I don't call it purpose because I think that people get stuck on the idea of purpose. They think if I'm not Mother Teresa, it's not good enough. So we could talk about that if that's of interest. And then the 5th essential element, I call time and place, because people think I just don't have enough time. We can't control time. Einstein taught us that time warps. All we can do is control the energy we have in the time available. And so understanding that, understanding how to maximize your energy with times of day to do things, how long breaks should be. So the quiz gets at those 5 things.
Cool. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, I like that. It's very good. But we all have the same amount of time, don't we? I think often it's how we choose to spend our time and what we prioritize and what we don't prioritize.
Yes.
And then we can get into that habit of sort of saying, we don't have time, I don't have time. And then that becomes a narrative, doesn't it? It becomes our truth. Whereas actually, we do have time. It's how we choose to spend it.
Exactly. And it's interesting. The first thing that came to mind when you said we all have the same amount of time, I was just at a leadership conference, and one of the keynote speakers showed a video of a car race, and they come in and they change the tires in like 2.5 seconds, all 4 tires. And he told the story about how they wanted to speed up and cut down, every millisecond works to 2 seconds. And ultimately, what worked is when the people changing the tires thought to themselves, I'm going to slow down and be more specific about how I do it. So even though we may think we have the same time, the way we experience it is so different.
Yeah.
Do you ever try to hold your breath and you think a minute is forever? And other times you only have a minute to do something. Time is very interesting.
That's excellent. And so what's your favorite element of those? What excites you the most in terms of the changes that people can experience if they get it right?
It's like, which is my favorite child? I have 3. Honestly, I think part of our challenge, part of our problem is that we tend to choose one, and a strength overused is a weakness. So I don't like the idea of actually choosing one of the 5 essential elements. It's like choosing one of my children, because I do believe that a strength overused becomes a weakness. And if we choose to focus on, for example, health and nutrition, I've got a diet that makes me feel great, but I don't know exactly what I want to do with this newfound energy because I don't really know what brings me joy, or I do, but I'm not really practicing it. So really, I narrowed it down to 5 essential elements from a world of options so that it is workable, but all 5 are equally as important.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fantastic answer. Actually, it was an unfair question from me, but it's a good answer, because we can get very fixated on one particular part of life, and then we forget. It's like I hate the Western approach to medicine, where we focus, if you've got a pain in your elbow, then you go and see an elbow doctor, and they look at your elbow, and the elbow's connected to the arm bone and everything else, and we need to look at the whole picture, and
100%. In fact, the way I got into coaching in some ways was as a result of my daughter being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when she was 8 years old. She's now 27, healthy, has her whole body, but she had an autoimmune disease, and we went to doctors, Western doctors. She was hospitalized for weeks. It was quite serious.
And everywhere, the doctor said she needs surgery. She has to have her colon taken out. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And as a woman who doesn't take, no for an answer, I just kept saying, that can't be it. And I opened myself up to it, actually, this idea of what we call integrative medicine, integrating Eastern and Western. And ultimately, something called homeopathy is really what saved her life as we know it. And she never had surgery. She doesn't take anything. And Western doctors said impossible because they just looked at this part of her body. They didn't look at the holistic system. There was something out of whack. And homeopathy takes this holistic approach, as does acupuncture. She had both. So I'm a strong believer in that.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah. Oh, and it took me to being a coach because I realized before that I did consulting, management consulting, strategic planning. I was her navigator. And it was a role that I felt comfortable in, helping people navigate. And interestingly, after that, I don't know if I showed up differently. I guess life experiences change us. People started asking if I would coach them. And before this call, you and I were talking about where we're from. And I've been in California for 35 years, but originally I'm a New Yorker. So I both have that. I'm a good listener. I'm creative. I'm Californian. But at the end of the day, I want results. And so the New Yorker in me thought it sounded soft. What is this coaching stuff? But when I looked at it, I realized there were 0 master's level gerontologists and certified coaches in the United States at the time. And coaching is a powerful skill set and tool. And if I hadn't been through probably one of the most difficult periods of my life, if your child is very ill, it's about as bad as it can get. I wouldn't get to where I am today.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you've told me a lot about how wonderful this time of life is. Is there anything that you don't like? Is there anything that annoys you and irritates you about this time of life?
Yeah, the body parts. I mentioned I've got titanium rocking down my leg. I've had a hip replacement. I've got various other ailments. So I think, look, physical changes happen. After 30, we lose what's called our vital capacity, that is when we're the top of our physical prowess. Now, just this morning, I tweeted out, there's a 94-year-old, his name is Bert, who still is a soccer goalie at 94. We can do tons of things. There are people in their 80s running marathons. But if we're looking strictly at waking up and feeling great right away, not having any joint remind us, oh, here I am. Those days are kind of over. But, there's no free lunch. We also get that ability to enjoy life in a much richer, deeper way because we don't care so much about what other people think. We have this crystallized intelligence where all the experiences we have had, if we take the time into ourselves, meditating, for example, to clear our minds, we're so much more powerful in so many ways, that we've had that time of our life where that was the number one. We could either have a mindset where we get stuck on that, or we cultivate what we do have so we can use it to the best of our abilities and reap the benefits of things that only time can bring us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and maybe leave me a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. There's a wellness program, courses, midlife mentoring to help make the most of your next chapter, and our online members club. Because life's just too short for plain biscuits. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.